Sir, can you please speak again so that we can test? Sir, can you hear me?
Namaste.
Yes, sir. Now you're audible. Yes, sir. Sir, Sunit sir is in the office. He has some work. He'll be joining us in some time. We can begin by the we can begin. Thank you.
So as usual, we'll begin by meditating for about 20-25 minutes. Okay. So let's sit quietly. I'll just do some chanting within myself and then we'll start. So let us begin. Let's sit quietly. Keep the back and neck straight. Close our eyes. Keep the back and neck straight and not take the support of the back of the chair so that you don't fall asleep. You may remain more alert and extend the spinal cord to its largest length. So you straighten up so that the spinal cord becomes extended fully. And that is the simple way to ensure that you are sitting straight. And then we find out whether we are breathing or not. And that is to say, we actually experience the process of breathing, the breath going in, breath coming out, which you can experience in variety of ways, as already discussed. So whatever is convenient to you, it could be the nostrils where the breath actually goes in and comes out, or in the chest, because when breath comes in, the chest expands. When breath goes out, chest contracts. Or in the belly. There also the belly movements can be correlated with the respiratory process. So we use breath as an object of our attention and try to keep the attention glued onto this object so as to raise our concentration level and simultaneously become somewhat calm, experience some tranquility. Maintain the continuity of awareness. So, during the entire process of the breath going in, we are aware. Breath is going in, breath is going in. We have to be aware, we don't have to speak. And when the breath is coming out again, right from the time it starts to come out, till it ends, you're constantly aware. And when we practice like that, we can become aware of the short gaps during the transition process, from in-breath to out-breath, from out-breath to in-breath. The transition always happens with stopping of breath for a few moments. So try to note that also. Try not to move at all. Sit still. If you move the body, then the attention will get filtered away. You won't be able to focus. That's why we're doing for a very short time. Sit still, perfectly still. But breath is very subtle. You cannot figure it out if the body is also moving, hands are moving, or whatever. Thoughts may arise, mind may get lost in thoughts. As soon as we become aware that mind has wandered away, we must make a mental note, oh, mind has wandered away, and relax. And with a smiling face, let the attention naturally come back to the breath. Wherever you're observing, come back there. Mind is wandering away very much. I'm not able to focus attention at all, then work on deep breathing. Take 3-4 slowly, take 3-4 deep breaths, keeping attention on the nostrils, and then let go. Let the natural breath slowly come back, and keep your attention there so that you can be aware of the breath going in, coming out. You will also be aware of the duration of the breathing process. Duration in terms of whether the in-breath is longer or the out-breath is longer. And you'll notice that these things keep on changing. All these are expedient means to keep the mind engaged, because otherwise mind will soon experience some calmness and go to sleep or get into mental proliferations. So we focus on the duration of the breath. Those who are working on area around the nostril, they can see through which nostril the breath is going in, through which it is coming out. These are only to make us more and more alert, more and more mindful. Well, you can now open your eyes. Then open your eyes. How many of you have been practicing at home also? Anybody? One of you. Please try to spend time in home. Then you will start feeling the benefit. Okay, my attention will become more focused and mind will become calm. But that needs a regular practice. So try to do that. So we'll start today's discussions. You see the screen now?
Yes, sir.
So we'll now start with after having the introduction over the last two classes, we'll start with some slightly in-depth teaching of the Buddha. We'll try to understand. It takes quite a few sessions. So we'll begin with 3, then maybe with part of it. This is the presentation I have made for 3. Then we'll see how many more are needed. As I had mentioned in the introduction also, the very basic teaching of the Buddha, which is recognized in all traditions, it's a kind of a universal acceptance of that. Teaching of 4 noble truths. What is noble about them? That if one can really assimilate these and follow these as advised by the Buddha, one can become a noble person. There's a concept of a noble person, which is called a Arya in the ancient language. And an Arya is one who is on the path to liberation. So there are, as I had mentioned, we'll be basing all our studies on the Pali Tipitaka. So, and there are Pali words, and Pali language is the ancient language of Central India, and East and North, which was refined, and Sanskrit arose from there. That's why Sanskrit, the meaning of Sanskrit is refined. So it's a refined language with proper grammar and all. Pali didn't have, it's a spoken language, and therefore it was based on the conventional understanding of the words. So I'll try to use Pali words for a certain reason because they have a precise meaning. When we convert them and translate them in English, the confusions can begin to happen because translations in English cannot capture the actual meaning of the word, as happens in any language. Nearest to that will be Hindi or Sanskrit. But I hope most of you are familiar with Hindi, so you may be able to understand easily. So they are called Ariya Satchang, noble truths. So the first one is called Dukkhang Ariya Satchang, which means the noble truth of suffering, unhappiness. That's the usual translation, but I'll prefer to use the word dukkha, as I've done in the subsequent columns. The second is called the Dukkha Samudayo Ariya Satchang, which means the noble truth of origin of the dukkha, understanding the how does it originate, how does it arise. And third is called Dukkha Nirodha Satcha, Nirod meaning complete cessation of it. So only noble truth of this cessation of dukkha. How does the dukkha end completely? And then fourth truth is called Dukkha Nirodha Gamini Patipada Ariya Satchang. दुख निरोध की ओर जाने वाला मार्ग. Gamini means going there. Patipada means the process, the path, walking on which will reach the end of suffering. So it's translated as noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of dukkha. You can see this is the similarity of this with the medicine paradigm or Ayurveda paradigm or any even modern medicine to some extent. If a person is ill, what do we do? What if he goes to a Vaidya in Ayurvedic parlance? So first thing he does is to diagnose what is the illness. Isn't it? So there are various ways of diagnosis, and in tradition with pulse and other questions and answers and symptoms. In modern science, we have much more elaborate methods of diagnosis, various kinds of tests, various kinds of pathological examinations, x-rays, CT scan, and so on. All that is why, what is the reason? Need to understand what the illness is. Because as a patient, one can only tell the symptoms. And then second is the origin. How did it arise? What will be the reason? A traditional Vad, if you go Ayurvedic Vad, you try to ask you, what happened? Did you eat something which was not worth eating? Did you expose yourself to weather, for example, extremely cold weather or extremely hot weather? Take some very cold water, hot water, or you met with some accident, fell down, hurt yourself. So you understand what is the cause, what is the origin, how did the illness arise. Once these two things are clear, then the physician will see, is there a possibility of curing it? So can this illness be cured? So he gives a prognosis. Yeah, it is possible to cure. Or he says, no, sorry, it's a terminal illness. There's nothing which can be done. We can at best prolong the life or whatever. And you must be aware these kind of diagnoses are often given. And then once he diagnoses, yeah, it is possible. Then you say, okay, these are the medications which are needed. These are the things which you have to be not to take this kind of food or this kind of drinks or sugar or not sugar or things, salt, various ahar you have to adjust. Then the medicines have to be taken. They have to be taken in a proper manner, and medicines have to be tuned to the illness. So That's exactly the paradigm which is followed by the Buddha. A rational scientific paradigm of trying to understand what is the cause of this suffering? What is the nature of, first is what is the nature of suffering? Dukkha, Ariya Satcham. Then is what is the origin? How did it arise? Because once we know how it arises, then you can do something about it to prevent its arising. So we have Dukkha Nirodha Ariya Satcham. And then if the physician is good, he will be able to say, okay, this is the medication, this is the things which you don't have to do, these are the things which you have to do, and so on. So exactly same thing is followed. Buddha says, okay, what is dukkha? So he tells us, this is dukkha. What is the origin? Okay, this is the cause. Then, is it doable? Is it removable? Yes, it is removable. And then, how do we go about it? These are the 8 steps you must follow to remove the unhappiness or dukkha, whatever else you want to call it. Okay. So we'll go slowly through each of them and try to understand, because there's a different way of looking at this situation than what is maybe the modern way. So we go to the terminology. We understand each of these terms. So what does dukkha mean? It essentially stands for, if you see the detailed statement, says, I think it's given there. Yeah, let me first say. It says rebirth is suffering, illness is suffering, aging is suffering, death is suffering, then sorrow, lamentation, distress, despair. These are the various forms of suffering, dukkha, which he points out. And then tries to categorize them. Association with the people, with the situations which we don't like. So association with the despised. Separation from the loved. Not getting what is wanted. All this is quite easily understandable, I hope. Isn't it? But then he pinpoints it. In short, the 5 clinging aggregates are dukkha. Now, what is that? It's written as Sankittena Panch Upadana Khanda Dukkha. That's the Pali sentence. So, firstly, we can see what is dukkha, the various kinds of unpleasant experiences we have in life. They could be physical pain, that also is included there, and also mental anguish of various kinds. So you can define it as suffering, unease, stress, dissatisfaction, unhappiness. So different people in English language use different words to bring out the various flavors of dukkha. Okay. So if a person hits a toe, walking, hits a toe, hits onto a stone, then there's a pain. That is a physical pain. But associated with a physical pain, there can be a mental anguish. You can convert that physical pain also and add to it by creating a mental anguish about why did I get, oh no, why are people keeping stones here? They should not have kept, or I should have been more careful. I am careless. And you add up all the stories and create it into a mental pain. And then there is a pure mental anguish, loss of loved ones, loss of reputation, loss of wealth, that causing sorrow, dissatisfaction, lamentation. I call this remorse, feeling that I didn't do right, I should have done this way, not that way. So they are all come under the terminology of dukkha. Is this all clear to you? Leaving aside the last line, I hope these parts are clear.
Yes, sir.
This is all within our experience, isn't it? There's nothing unknown. We do have association with people whom we don't like, or associated with situations or places. We are by circumstances forced to into those situations or places or people, and then separation from the loved ones, our family members, friends. Separation may be temporary, may be permanent, as caused by death. As many experienced, we all must have experienced during the last 2 years. And not getting, then these are the various categories. You can see how slowly and slowly the generalization is being done. And not getting what is wanted. That statement there is yamapi ichhamna labhate tamapi dukkham. जो भी मैं इच्छा करता हूँ और नहीं प्राप्त होता वो दुख है. And that you can see is a generic statement. Not getting what is wanted. And then he extends it further to a deeper perspective. In short, the 5 clinging aggregates are dukkha. Now we have to understand what does it mean, So they have written down the Pali term and we'll break it up and try to understand. What does it mean? Sankhitena panchupadana khanda dukkha. So if whenever you find anything not clear, you stop and ask. Okay? Don't hesitate. Now, this word panch upadana khanda can be broken up like that. Panch, you I hope understand. What does panch mean?
5.
5. Okay? That's in Sanskrit also and Hindi also used. Upadan means attachment, excessive clinging. That is the meaning of upadan. It is partly used in Pali language also, in Sanskrit also. Then khanda. Khanda is a typical Pali word which means a bulk, a heap. And it has different connotations at different places. So I'll put down here the meanings of each of them. Upadana means grasping, clinging, attachment. Fuel which keeps alive an active process. That also is a meaning of fuel is also defined as upadana because it is because the fire clings to the fuel. So in that sense, it is said fuel is an upadana. And fire derives its existence from fuel, so it's drawing one's existence from. And khanda is defined as a bulk, a heap, a collection of things. Then a collection of sensorial aggregates. Our senses, they are all collections. Also, each of them is also called khanda, which condition the appearance of life and factors of existence, which means physical and mental factors. Then panch upadan khanda will therefore mean 5 sensorial aggregates with which we identify ourselves, to which we cling instinctively. So it's sometimes seen as 5 focuses of identity, जिससे हम अपने को पहचान बनाते हैं, मैं ये हूँ. Okay. Now, what are these 5 aggregates in the Buddha's teachings? In roughly, आज की भाषा में कहेंगे तो it will be body-mind complex. But then he defines mind in a very particular way, which is of great importance. And you can see its similarity with psychology. So the 5 aggregates which you identify are Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. That's the Pali words. Rupa means the physical form. तो हिंदी में भी रूप शब्द इस्तेमाल होता है, which means this body, this material body. Okay. Then Vedana stands for the feeling. How we feel on interacting with the world. We can feel pleasant, we can have unpleasant experience, pleasant experience or a neutral experience. And that can arise by interaction at every sense door. Sanya is the perception. Now, the perception word as used in English language has 2 meanings. And in psychology, people, the way you use perception is perception as a awareness of the world around, sensory perception, seeing through eyes, visual perception, auditory perception. That's not the meaning of it here. It means interpretation of experience. I'll get into details later. Then sankhara means the mental volitional formations, which means how we respond to the sensory input. All the time our senses are receiving input from the world. How we respond to that is called the volition. Sankhara. And Sankhara is a very omnibus term with various connotations. Slowly we'll try to come to terms with it. And then Vijnana means the consciousness, the awareness part of it, the basic ability to know. So once we understand this kind of classification, we can understand the functioning of the mind in great detail. Of course, there is subtler classification also available, but we'll not go into that now. We'll consider this 5 aggregate paradigm as sufficient, mostly sufficient for our class. So this Rupa is called Rupakhanda, and these 4 put together are called Arupino Khanda, which means they are not physical, they are immaterial. Feeling, perceptions, volition, consciousness, they don't have a material existence. They're not things, but they exist. And the example is given by a famous nun, an enlightened nun in the ancient times. She says, just as with the assemblage of parts, the word chariot is used, so when the aggregates exist, there is the convention, a being. So I'm trying to draw a picture of a chariot here. On the side, you can see it has various parts. The frame, the wheels, then the outer protection mechanism, then the horses, then the reins, and so on. So assemblage of these parts is called the chariot. Similarly, assemblage of these 5 aggregates is called the being. Now, for the moment, just try to understand that. When its connotation is very deep, we'll come to that slowly. Do you understand these things? Five parts, and you can see these are the various 5 aspects of functioning of mind. It's not separate things. They have been put down separately for the purpose of understanding. So all these Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara are seen as adjuncts of consciousness. When we are conscious, then only all these things operate. Say we are deep asleep, then this Vijnana, which is sense consciousness, I should have probably put down here, the sensory consciousness, then that's not available, and therefore there's no perception, there's no experience or no interpretation, there's no volition in the deep sleep. There's no feeling in the deep sleep. And it has, as we proceed further, you'll see how this helps us to understand cognition, behavior, how does volition arise, what are the emotions arise, how do we think. Everything can be understood once we see this method of breaking down the mental functioning into these 4 Arupino Khandas. Okay, any query on that?
I think it's clear, or you have a question?
Yes, sir. I have.
Go ahead.
Sir, in the form of consciousness, is it still considered formless? Why the differentiation between consciousness and Arupino Khanda?
No, it also is a part of it. I think this, I reformatted it, so this stopped here. This should be extended. All these 4 are Arupino Khandas. Thank you. I actually reformatted it, so this, I didn't extend it properly. I should have extended it. So we say Khandas are Rupino Khanda and Arupino Khanda.
All right, sir.
Now let's understand each one of them in detail, so that we can get a clarity, because we will use this paradigm for understanding the whole of human psychology and behavior and everything. So we come to Rupa, which is the material form. Now you remember the teachings of the Buddha deal with experience. They don't deal with the things as such. So you must remember that all the time. So when you talk of rupa, it means material form as experienced by us. He's not talking about the what the rupa is made up of in the modern scientific terms. But when you experience it in deep, you actually can go beyond the modern scientific terminology. So it says material form as experienced by us. Now, on what does our experience depend? It depends on our senses and the abilities of the mind, abilities of the senses. Now, how do you experience material form? Have you ever seen a small toddler handling any object? What does he do? How does she find out? You give a small thing, you give a small object to a toddler, say 1 year old, 1.5 year old girl or boy. What does he do? What does she do with it? Can you just articulate it?
Put it in their mouth.
Yes, that is one thing. It'll put it in the mouth.
Try
And
to.
then if the taste is not good, it doesn't attract it.
She
But
might
before
try,
that, anything else?
she might try to like rattle it around to see if it
Yeah.
can make a sound.
Yes, good. Then it also, when it lifts it up in the hand, the child will see whether it is soft or hard. Suppose it has spikes all around. It'll take it and throw it out. Oh, it's painful to hold it, isn't it? So the child will put it in the hand and see, is it soft? Is it hard? Then suppose there is something which is very hot, a cup of tea which is very hot. If he touches it and then scares and runs away from it, it's too hot or too cold. Yeah? This is what senses can determine very easily. Then you give an object which is semi-solid, like a dough, and you put it in the hand and then you say, oh, it flows off. Or an object like a balloon which has the ability to move around here and there. Then he says, oh, it's moving. So this is what is the primary cognitive abilities of human beings. We can feel for any object, we feel its solidity, its hardness, its softness, and we know that it is extending in space. It is an object. Any form will extend in space. Then second will be its liquidity, whether it is solid or liquid or semi-solid, semi-liquid. Then the temperature, hot or cold, and then movement. So these are the four basic experiences which we have whenever we handle objects, whenever we handle a form, material form. So in our ancient literature of all traditions of India, these are qualified as Mahabhutas, four great elements. Prithvi Dhatu, Apo Dhatu, Tejo Dhatu, Vayu Dhatu. And the experience is that of either Prithvi means solidity. Prithvi jo hai solid hoti hai. Apo Dhatu means liquidity and cohesion. If you see water, the ability of the water is to cohese the things together, coalesce the things. If you take flour and put on a plate and put water in it, the flour will all assemble together and you may get into a dough. So it tries to coalesce it. And if you put too much water, then it will thin it out and you'll get a liquid form. So that's called Apo Dhatu. Apo means water. Then Tejo Dhatu means heat, fire. objects are either hot or cold. And then Vayu Dhatu. Vayu is associated with movement. So you call it Vayu Dhatu. So these are the 4 elements which are always present in every matter, which means these are the 4 experiences of varying intensity which will have. Some object may not have any movement, some object may have very high temperature, that may be prominent, in another the liquidity may be prominent, in another the solidity may be prominent, but all the 4 elements properties will be always present. And then there are derived properties from there, like taste and smell and color and so on. I'll not get into that. But what I'm trying to put it out is that material form, as spoken in the teachings of the Buddha, is as experienced by it. So we say it is constituted by 4 great elements and its derived material form therefrom. So that's why I said there are 24 types of matter derived therefrom. You don't have to bother about that. I'm just mentioning for the sake of completion. The key thing is to be known is that matter is essentially these 4 great elements, and these 4 great elements are constantly undergoing a change. They're not fixed entities. In human body, we breathe in air, breathe out the processed air. So the body inside the body, the air element is constantly undergoing a change. We take water, we take solid food, so the Prithvi Dhatu keeps on changing. If we take greasy food, that is a large element of Prithvi Dhatu, and therefore it makes us inert. It makes us it sets in inertia because heaviness sets in. By taking heavy food, we say no heaviness. I've taken heavy food, so the heaviness sets in, and one goes to sleep. And we have gaseous formations within the body, so they constitute the Vayu Dhatu. And all movements are explained as essentially the transformation of into Vayu Dhatu, which cause the movement of the body. And Tejo Dhatu, heat, is the one most important manifestation of that is the digestive fire, the one which digests the food, which causes the oxidation. In modern terms, I'll say oxidation of the food and converts it and does the metabolic exercises and all that. So this is the experiential aspect of the form, for human form especially, as also the inert form outside. So in every matter, these 4 elements will be present. But depending on the intensity, which of them may be dominating. Heat may dominate, liquidity may dominate, vayu, the movement may dominate, or the solidity may dominate. So when we sit and practice meditation, and at the moment you're of course only observing the air going in, coming out. But you must have seen, if you see the chest and the belly, there is movement which is taking place because of the air going in, coming out. And when gases are formed in the abdomen and elsewhere, it causes a lot of difficulties in the body because the movements become uncontrolled and they can affect different organs of the body. And it is the balance of these 4 elements which is very important for maintaining good health. Excess of earth element will cause inertia and solidity, which is the extreme case of it is in paralysis, where movement is not possible. Excess of water element is cause diarrhea, and reduction of that will cause dehydration. Excess of fire element or Tejo Dhatu will cause fever or excessive hypothermia and decrease in the digestive capabilities. The hunger appetite falls down. The increase in biodhatu will cause gastric formations and the pains in the body, trembling, Epilepsy is an extreme form of that. So the balance of these elements is what keeps the body in good shape. Has been the classical Ayurvedic formulation. Of course, they have even subtler than that. I'm not getting into Ayurveda, but just explaining it to the extent it is necessary for our experience. Because as we practice meditation, we actually note, oh, this is Vayu Dhatu, excessive movement is happening in the body. This is Tejo Dhatu, my body is getting heated up or cooled down. Oh, my body is getting extremely rigid, it's not able to move. So Prithvi Dhatu is arising. And thus, when we see it as that, then body becomes impersonal. Because you can't say earth element belongs to me, water element belongs to me. It's like saying electrons belong to me, neutrons belong to me. They are the part of nature. Earth, air, fire, water are parts of nature. They are the properties of nature. So it does a depersonalization of the body. That's the beginning of that. Understanding that is it. And that's the direction in which the Buddha's teachings move. Okay, is this clear? Yeah, please ask questions.
Sir, in Ayurveda, there is this fifth element called ether.
Yeah,
So,
Akasha.
why did Buddha then take in account this element?
Yeah, it is taken. There are in the teachings, there is Akasha also mentioned as a element, and even consciousness is mentioned as an element in some of the teachings. Now, the main reason why the when the emphasis on them was not increased, the Vijnana is anyway taken separately, but Akash Dhatu is not mentioned because it does not come within our experience. See, you must remember, it is material form is experienced by us. When we meditate and we try to feel how the body feels, you feel these things: heaviness, heat, movement, solidity, liquidity, so on. You don't feel empty space. Akash means empty space. So you can't deny that. Empty space is seen as creating a difference, creating a separation between these elements, properties, so that the distinction of these is maintained. We can actually feel this is heaviness. We can actually feel this is heat. This is what is actual experience. So the teachings of the Buddha are all based on what one experiences. So when we do non-material practices, there are meditations where we do non-material practice. Then we do it on space, consciousness, emptiness, and so on. So I'm just mentioning to you as much as is required for us. So there are only 4 great elements defined because these are the ones which are come directly within our experience.
So there was one more question.
Yeah.
Sir, the use of word dhatu. Dhatu has been in the ancient text, has been used in different contexts. So can you elaborate more on it?
Here it is used in the context of element, which is the basic building block in that sense. And modern science also use elements as the basic building block of atoms and matter and compounds and so on. Exactly same. Dhatu is also used in the sense of relics, isn't it?
Yes,
So-
relics in sense of verbs as well, then in sense
Yeah,
of
in sense
tissues
of-
as well.
In sense of grammar, it is has a different meaning. So here it is in terms of the basic building blocks of matter. Basic building blocks of experience, I should say.
Sir, how did we infer that the ether element is not experienced in meditation? Like, what are the assumptions behind it?
There's no assumption. It is pure experience. You sit and meditate and see whether you can experience actually, not imagine, not assume. See, you can't experience space. You can't experience emptiness. You infer it. So you're talking of material form as experienced by us. We can infer it, of course. There is emptiness between my nostrils. Otherwise, how will air go in? There's emptiness in the abdomen. Otherwise, how will food go in? There's emptiness in this room. Otherwise, how will I sit? There's emptiness in the space in your classroom. Otherwise, how will you sit? Isn't it? That you can see. You are inferring on the basis of the observation, but you don't directly experience it in a physical sense. Physical sense, you experience heat. That's a direct experience. Heaviness is a direct experience. Movement is a direct experience. Isn't it? Hardness is a direct experience. Softness is a direct experience. Something flowing is a direct experience. So that's the point. Okay? There's a difference between experience and inference. It's not to say that inference is wrong or right. It's to say that this is direct experience. Any other question?
No, sir.
Should we go ahead? Move ahead?
Yes, sir. No more questions.
Okay. Now we'll come to the process of cognition. I think this is an important part of modern psychological study. How does one know things? So, as I have written consciousness, a better word would be sensory consciousness. Okay, so you may kindly add that suffix, a prefix. I've written it here below, sensory consciousness, which means the knowing through the senses. Which is the experience of cognition. I understand in English language and in some psychology books as going through, they use the word perception. Now we use perception for something else, so it has to be clear. We don't call sensory perception, we call sensory consciousness. So what are the various senses we have? You don't need to see on the screen. You all know directly, isn't it? So what are they? Can you touch and show?
Sight, eyes, sight through eyes, and hearing through ears, nose, tongue,
Tongue, and which is the fifth? Skin, which is the touch. Now, in the Buddha's teachings, we talk of 6 senses. So the mind is also seen as a sense. Mind in the sense of thinking mind, the ability to think. That is seen as a mano vijnana. So with each word, you arrange vijnana. So you call chakhu vijnana. Chakhu, I hope you understand, is chakshu. It is a Pali form of chakshu. Shrota is Pali form of shrota. Shrota means ear. Ghana is form of smell. Jiva, we know, is tongue. And then kaya is the body, surface of the body, kaya vijnana. And mano vijnana means thinking a thought in the mind. So what are the characteristics of each one of them? Chakhu vijnana is the process of seeing color or form through the eyes. Eyes can see basically color. And because of the distribution of colors, the form is created in them in a very mysterious process, both of the seeing as well as of the form. Nobody understands how it happens. If you study the detailed neuroprocesses involved, ultimately we find there is photons coming up onto the eye, they hit the retina, there is an image formed in the inverse order, and that gets somehow converted into electrical signals, which are carried by the optic nerve into the brain, the part of the brain which is supposed to be responsible for seeing. And from there, neurons are fired, millions of neurons are fired, and somehow we begin to see. How it happens, nobody knows. That's called the hard problem of consciousness. Nobody knows really. So it is defined in the Buddha as the ability to know. He doesn't get into the neuroscience of it. He says, yeah, there is an ability to know through the eyes that we call as Chakku Vijnana. Similarly, there is an ability to know the world through these ears. Through the eyes, we see forms or colors. Through the ears, we hear sounds. Through the nose, we smell fragrances. Through the tongue, we taste flavors. Through the skin, through the kaya, we touch objects. These are tactile sensations. And through the mind, mano, we have thinking, thought. Now then he makes a very revolutionary statement, which is not in tune with the previously existing traditions of the India. He says all these six vijnanas, six sense consciousnesses arise due to contact of senses with their object when the conditions are appropriate. So it is a conditioned phenomena. It's not something which is given and happens all the time. So vijnanas are conditioned when momentary experiences which arise and pass away at a very, very rapid rate. And this is something quite unique to the teachings of the Buddha. So what does it mean conditions are appropriate? For example, when we, what they call as seeing, let's see that, arising of Chakku Vijnana. It says Chakku Vijnana arises when there is an eye base which is working. There is an object which is within the field of experience. Then there is light. Then there is attention. Some element of ekagrata, some element of concentration. Mind is not deluded totally. Then cognition happens, not otherwise. There may be a good eye, there may be a good object, no light, no cognition, no sensory cognition, eye consciousness. You can't see. There may be object, there may be eye, there may be light, but then your attention is somewhere else. You will not see. And the same thing similarly conditions for all other arising of sensory consciousness. For ear, there has to be sound, there has to be properly working ear, properly sound within the field of experience, and there has to be a medium for the transmission of sound to the ear. And attention again. If attention is not there, you'll miss the sound. And yet, I'm sure it is within our own experience. When you're, for example, studying or seeing something else, and somebody calls us from behind, we don't listen. It's not that the sound was not there, ear was not operating, but attention was not there. Attention was to the book or the whatever we are doing. Similarly, you can easily identify what will be the conditions for fragrance, for taste, and skin, and mind. Now, there are statements made that at one mind moment, these vijnanas arise and pass away at a very rapid rate. Now, you may say, we don't feel it. Yeah, because the things are so rapid that it gives you a sense of continuity. It's like seeing the motion picture in a cinema hall. We actually project on the screens different frames, but we don't see the frames because they're going at such a rapid rate that it is beyond the ability of our eyes to distinguish the equal frames, because the rapidity is more than 10 frames per second, which is the maximum which eyes can distinguish. Now, when you, for example, let me ask you, when you see see television program or a video on your computer or your phone, do you see and hear simultaneously? What do you think?
Be a little late.
Mhm.
Can we probably keep going back and forth quickly, very fast. So it seems as though it's happening simultaneously.
It happens, it looks as if it is simultaneously happening, but the mind keeps on going from one to another so rapidly that we don't miss. We see and hear as if it seems you're hearing this moment it is being spoken, we're seeing the moment it is coming on the screen. Because our rate of arising and passing away of the mind, these phenomena, mind states, is so high, which is beyond our capability of even the very good meditator. It needs extraordinary abilities of the mind to be able to decipher. And it said a person like a fully enlightened Buddha or his chief disciples can only decipher mind movements separately. But you can actually get a glimpse of that if you, for example, decide, say you're looking at a TV and you decide, let me see what this person is wearing. And you will get fascinated by some person's garland or jewels, and you try to focus on that. You try to do it, you'll miss the words, because attention will go totally glued to that. The word is being spoken will be missed. And suppose the speech is not very clear, and you try, oh no, let me understand what this person is saying. Then you'll not be able to, you'll miss out in the sights. This experiment is worth doing. So you can see that, yeah, this is happening alternately, but at a very rapid rate. So that's what he's saying. At one particular mind moment, which means a millionth of a second or something of that kind, at one particular mind moment, only one sensory consciousness arises. It's either seeing or hearing, or tasting or touching or smelling or whatever. But since the rate of a movement is so rapid, it looks like a continuous phenomena. Now, this is something which only with great depth of meditation one can actually discern. But when you're not able to discern it, you presume consciousness is constant, it's always there. The discourse in which these statements are made, I've read in that MN, you remember? Majjhima Nikaya, discourse number 18. This arising of consciousness is explained. Now, obviously, with each sense consciousness, there will be a corresponding object. So, let me ask you, what is the object for Chakshu Vijnana? What will be object? Object will be the form. There is a statue here, small in front of me. So that is the object. And through the eye and interaction of eye and that object, the sense of seeing arises because there is enough light and I am focusing attention in that direction. So this object is called, in the Pali language, you call it Arammana. And you can see, in Hindi there's the word Alamban. In Sanskrit also. Alamban means something which you hold on to. So form or color is the object of the eye. I cannot hear. I cannot smell. I cannot taste. Fragrance is the object of the nose. Sound is the object of the ear, and so on. Similarly, thought is the object of the mind. Mind as defined in that narrow sense of ability to think, not in the omnibus term as we define it in English language. So these are the 6 senses and their objects, their arammana. I'm using these words because these help us to clearly distinguish between various categories. Otherwise, you get really confused. If you use the word object, object has so many connotations. But when you use the word arammana, we know what does it mean. Okay. So this is the process of the elementary process of cognition, arising of sense consciousness based on the sense base. This is called sense base, and that is this corresponding object and other appropriate conditions. This is the basic cognition, means just awareness of the object. But there are many more things which happen, which are a part of the other Rupino Khandas. So this distinction, you will notice, has been done to become very clear what exactly is the role of the various aspects of our general awareness which we have as human beings or as all sentient beings. So one aspect of it is pure sense consciousness, becoming aware of the world as it impinges on our senses. Is this clear? Any questions on that? You please ask me.
I think it's clear, sir.
Good. Thank you. Then we move to the Vedana. That's a very tricky thing because in modern times in Hindi language, the word Vedana is used for pain or unpleasant experience. किसी की डेथ हो जाती है तो हम कहते हैं हार्दिक संवेदनाएं. That's not the meaning of the word Vedana here. Essentially means the affective tone of experience. If I may use a term with which psychologists are familiar, it is the affective tone. कैसा लग रहा है, कैसा महसूस हो रहा है, pleasant है, unpleasant है या neutral है. So basically there are 3 tones of experience. There are of course shades: excessively pleasant, mildly pleasant, excessively unpleasant, mildly unpleasant, totally neutral. Of course, neutral can't have shades in that sense. Now, these feelings arise along with consciousness. So I must, I think, take you back to those basic diagram. The Vijnana is the primary Arupino Khanda, and Sankhara, Sanya, Vedana, they're all arise whenever Vijnana arises. They all arise simultaneously, actually. And all of these put together actually complete the cognition process. So coming to the Vedana here, you can see that feelings will arise at each sense door. For example, when you see something, it may give rise to pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling. You see a beautiful scenery, a hilltop with a lake and all that. And we feel it gives us a pleasant feeling. And it is in search of these pleasant feelings that we go to hill stations and resorts and forests and whatever you have. Then you go around in Delhi, you have many places where you have huge heaps of rubbish, mountains of rubbish. You go to in East Delhi, we have one such rubbish here in Ghazipur. In North Delhi, you can see at the Karnal bypass, Delhi bypass there at the huge kind of mountain of rubbish. Nobody feels happy on seeing that. It's extremely unpleasant. Of course, it's not only unpleasant to sight, it's unpleasant to smell also. And then you go to a barren field and see usually a sand sort of spread over a land, a desert. It can give rise to neutral feeling. Of course, it can give rise to other feelings also, but that would be the easiest example of that. Sight. What appears beautiful appears ugly or appears bland. So that is pleasant feeling at the eye. So it's called Chakku Sampasaya Vedana. The feeling arising because of contact at the eye. And there's a precise words for that. So we'll put it in, the Buddha will say, this is the feeling arising because of sense contact at the eye. Eye has come in contact. There's an eye interacting with its object, with its arammana, and the feeling associated with it is these three kinds of feelings, which arise when they see a beautiful thing, an ugly thing, sight, or a bland sight. Similarly, you can see it with each sense door. So what will it be with sound? Can you classify it with respect to sound?
Soft and harsh.
Yeah, sound, we'll categorize only in these: pleasant, unpleasant, neutral.
High pitch, low pitch.
So if you, depending on one's past conditionings, the
loudspeaker, traffic
soft,
noise.
there can be a music which is very well, a symphony or a music which sounds very pleasant. So we call it music. When it is not pleasant, we call it noise. And there can be a bland speech, which is neither a noise nor a music. Similarly, as odor, it can be fragrant, deo and perfumes and all that, or it can be stinky, unpleasant feeling, like you go near a garbage dump, or you see excreta lying on the road, or you see a corpse, a dog run over by a vehicle, stink, and the body is rotting. It gives extremely stinky feeling, or it could be an odorless feeling. You have a water in a glass, and there's no smell associated with that. And so you can see, similarly, you can see the feelings at all other sense doors. They can always be classified into these three categories. And then feelings can also arise due to thinking. Some thoughts may be pleasant, some may be unpleasant, and some may be barely neutral, just going around proliferating this, that. Some can be very pleasant when you're thinking about your very dear friend or your fiancé, or you have a romantic relationship with somebody, pleasant thoughts. And when you happen to remember your enemy or somebody who has broken your relationship with you, then you get extremely unpleasant thoughts. And some neutral thoughts, like some things which keep on happening, mental proliferations which keep on happening without our control. So that's why it says in all, we can therefore say there are 18 types of feelings. At each sense door, the feeling can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This is one of the basic classifications. Of course, there can be further classified. I don't want to bother you too much with that, because this is enough for us to understand how we behave, because behavior is all strongly governed by feelings, by the Vedana. Okay? Is this clear?
Yes.
Good. Then we come to the third Arupino Khanda, the Sanya, the perception, in the sense in which I explained, which is recognition, पहचानना. विज्ञान को कहा जानना, संज्ञा को कहा पहचानना. It's a factor which recognizes the sense objects. It names the experience and interprets and evaluates it. And you can see it directly has a strong relationship with the feeling. It actually conditions the feeling very immediately. Now, what is the basis of recognition? It's the characteristics as apprehended by senses, and that we relate it to our past memories and conditioning. That's a very important part of it. Conditioning. Conditioning means conditioned by our families, by our school, by our friends, by our environment, by the country, by the weather. So on that basis, we evaluate things. This is good, this is bad. This kind of dress is good, this kind of dress is bad. This kind of food is good, this kind of food is bad. And you can apply it to everything. And why it is most important for us is it is the most crucial factor in conflicts. What is it? Lack of recognition of the conditioned nature of perception. That is based on conditionings. And different people have different conditionings because they belong to different circumstances, different families, different schooling, different friends, different traditions of their family. So obviously they'll be conditioned differently. Somebody will say this kind of food is good. Somebody will say this fruit is good. Another will say no, this is good. This is what I should take. No, this is what I should take. And this is one of the most crucial, and it's a subtle factor because it's not easily recognized. This recognizes everything, but we don't recognize that this also is a mental factor which is subject to conditioning. So we need to discuss it in some depth, because in terms of our conflicts, in terms of the suffering, this plays a very crucial role in our lives. So a separate presentation on perception, and then go through that. And so as I already mentioned, there's a problem with this word, English word perception. Even in the dictionary, you will see there are two different meanings given. One is the sense of perceiving the world outside. So you say an ability to notice something by seeing, hearing, smelling, for example, visual perception, auditory perception, and so on. This in the Buddha's terminology is called vijnana. Isn't it? As I explained to you. Seeing is chakshu vijnana, hearing is shrota vijnana. They are not sanya. So perception or sanya is interpretation of experience, impression or opinion or belief. It's a particular way of understanding or thinking about something. For example, we say there's a perception that management only wants to cut costs. This is the example I've taken from dictionary. the public's perception of him is slowly changing. And you can see how important it is for politicians. They spend whole of their life in order to create a perception of an image. Oh, we are such wonderful people. So we need to understand it very deeply. So I'll spend some considerable time on that, because over the years we've recognized, and since I counsel large number of meditators when they bring their own personal problems, and we see and draw their attention to the perceptional differences being the cause of conflicts, and not recognizing them to be conditioned, not recognizing them to be not absolutely true. We never question our perception. We think that it should be like that. So I'll start from very simple example and then go to more complex situations. There's very simple examples which I have been using in IITs in my classes also. Now there's something lying on the road and two people are seeing it. One says it is written as 6, other says it is written 9. And if they stick to their perceptions, they can come to blows. So what will be this conflict resolution? So, okay, to me it appears this is 9, to me you appear 6. Let me go to your side and see whether it is really so. And you say, oh yeah, from here it looks like 6, from there it looks like, then the conflict will not be there. There's a hidden message in that. Whether we can look at the things from the way other person is looking. This, of course, is a very simple, banal example, but you can see in our life, looking at situations of life, you can have different perspectives. And those differences of perspectives can cause conflicts. If I think my perspective is right and yours is wrong. In engineering drawing, we use these perspectives very beautifully. So this is an object here, and we look at it from on the one plane on the right and another plane on the left. So if you put light and you just keep this hidden, this object hidden, and you look at it from the left side, it looks like a rectangle. If you look at it from the right side, it looks like a circle. And those two people, if they don't bother to see where is it coming from, they'll come to a conflict. No, it is a circle. He says, no, it's a rectangle. While the truth is, it is something three-dimensional, which is a cylinder, which looks like a circle looked at from one side, looks like a rectangle when looked at from other side. There's common engineering drawing, so our students understand it easily. I hope you're also able to see that. There's another optical illusion, so-called optical illusion. They're not really illusions. They're essentially methods of understanding the way of looking at things. The examples, simple examples to see that. What do you see in the left-hand side picture? Can you tell me?
A chalice and two faces.
Okay. Anything else?
Glass. A vase.
Yeah, you can. If you focus on the black color, you see it as a vase. If you focus on the white color, you see it as two faces staring at each other. So it just needs a change in perspective. You can't see both of them at the same time. One has to have the humility to say, okay, let me change my perspective and see. Maybe the person who's saying it is two faces, maybe he's right. Let me try to see why he's saying so. And that is the beginning of humility. To see that other person is not wrong. Maybe he's also right. I may also be wrong. Or that maybe both of us are right. Looked at in this direction, it appears like that. Looked at from other direction, it appears like that. How about the other picture, other photograph? What do you think?
Boats and a bridge.
It could be series of sailing boats, or it could be a bridge, depending on which color you give importance to.
Sir,
Look at this. Look at this. Now you tell me, is the lady dancing, her legs are going clockwise or anti-clockwise?
clockwise.
बीच में घूम
चेंज हुई है नहीं?
हाँ अभी चेंज हुआ है
नहीं
अभी इधर घूम रहा है अभी चेंज हुआ है
दोनों दिख सकता है
ना ना ना
क्लॉकवाइज जा रहा है ना
It's a stack. It's actually a superimposition of two figures, that's all.
अब चेंज हो गया वो दोनों दिख सकता
It all depends on the manner in which you look at it. If you focus on one leg only or on the other leg, you'll see the difference. Same person will see it in different manners. Now this one I think you must be familiar with. This is a typical tool used for ink blots, randomly created just by throwing ink on blobs onto the paper. And the people who have a difficult psychological condition are asked to interpret and write down what are you seeing. There are at least 10 such ink blots, and they're asked to show all of them, and the person writes down, this is what I see. And based on what his feedback is, the psychologist is able to find, yeah, this is this kind of problem he is suffering from. For example, in this, what do you see? What is your first impression? As soon as you see it, what is your first impression? Just write it down and see and check whether all of you think it is same thing.
red caps.
I see two elephants.
I see a bird.
I see two people dancing and clapping their hands.
I see two elephants joining their.
Yeah, you don't see different. I see people dancing
Very
and
good. I would say as you look at this, you put your attention on this white color in the between.
It looks like a plane.
Bird.
Bird या plane?
Shuttlecock जैसे.
Shuttlecock हाँ.
अच्छा उल्टा.
हाँ.
But वो मुझे.
center का white space है, मुझे तो bird type का दिखेगा.
हाँ वो जैसे rocket.
If you are a disciple of the Buddha and if you have visited various monasteries, you will see that this is the typical shape. This is the typical shape of monasteries in Burma and Thailand, this shape. Okay. This is a typical shape of what's called a stupa, where the relics of an enlightened person are kept. So if a person who is devout Buddhist sees it, his attention will go to that. And of course, if he's scared, if he has a mental problem, he'll say, oh, there's blood all around. These are two ghosts fighting, and there's blood at his left, there's blood in the air, and they're just all over bloody. They're all bleeding very heavily. The person has enormous fear complex in his mind. So the state of mind reflects on how you look at the things, how it changes your perception. Your conditioning of the mind changes how you look at the world. In science also it is recognized. That has been one of the greatest advances in science, in quantum theory. If you've studied science, some of you, how many of you have come from science background? Have you studied physics? Anybody?
In school.
Even if you haven't, the statement is universal. You can easily understand that. What he's saying is that in any experiment with microparticles, means fundamental particles of the existence, matter, the observer gets information not about the properties of the particles themselves, but the properties associated with some particular situation, including the measuring instruments. So the information about the objects under different experimental conditions should be considered as complementary to each other, like various sides of a single reality. So the beauty of this is, hidden behind this is the classical experiment, what's called wave-particle duality. By adjusting the experimental apparatus, a particular thing, as you may call it, it behaves like a wave. And if you adjust the experiment slightly differently, it behaves like a particle. What the thing is in itself, nobody knows. So they say, as Immanuel Kant put it, the thing in itself can never be known.
Rashomon effect.
Now, this Rashomon effect is different. Sorry, this is I just written it because of I didn't have any other space. This is called the Bohr's principle of complementarity. Niels Bohr was a Nobel laureate who played a key role in quantum physics development. So, a more striking, more directly visible impact of this different perceptions about same event or same thing is given in this by the term now known as Rashomon effect. I don't know if you've heard about it. Have you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then I don't need to bother. So, and one of you should explain to me.
How the same situation can be viewed differently by different people. It depends on the perspectives from which they are looking at things, perceiving as well.
And that perspective is called sanya. Okay? That is the meaning of sanya. That how you look at the world and is governed by conditioning of the people. You know? Because in that example, there are 4 different people looking at that event, and each of them has conditioning, each of them has biases, and therefore the eyewitness accounts don't tally. It's not that they are knowingly telling lies. It's not that. They actually believe this is what they saw. Now let me. So it's because of these things that the Buddha calls perception is like a mirage. Perception in the sense of sanya. I think I should change it to sanya. You understand what is a mirage? You know, it seems as if there is water there on the road. When there is hot weather, this is what this apparition we all see. But there's no water there, just an appearance. So why he's saying it's like a mirage, because it is based on what appears to senses. And we have a mental construct in our minds based on our past memories, experiences, and we build an image out of that, which is obviously not the truth. And you can see what an important role it plays in our life. Different people can view the same situation differently based on their conditioning and the state of mind at that moment. And since the state of mind changes, conditioning itself can change with experience, with more information, then the perception is constantly changing. It's not fixed. Perception is also, just as consciousness is constantly changing, perception is also consciously changing. Feeling is also constantly changing. You know that. You see something, it soon sounds pleasant, slowly the pleasantness will change. And this becomes immediately obvious when mind becomes calm. When you meditate, you can actually see, oh, this is how I perceive things. Same phenomena I perceived in this manner yesterday. Now with a calm mind, when I see its various other facets, which I totally ignored. And once we really understand that, oh, my perception is conditioned, it can be erroneous. In fact, Buddha says all perceptions are erroneous. So I need not really stick to that and hold on to it as the truth. And if we can come to that level of realization, there will be hardly any conflicts if both the parties can come to that realization. Okay, I think we should stop here because it's become heavy. If you have any questions on that, you can ask me, then we'll continue in the next class. Any questions?
Sir, when we were talking about Vinana, consciousness, so for example, for sight, will the object will be a thing, not the light? Light will be a source, or light can be an object,
Light is an enabling condition
enabling condition.
for seeing an object. If there is darkness, we can't see.
So it's not an object.
Also,
No.
color.
Because unless you are focusing on the light itself.
How would you see?
If you want to focus on the light, for example, you look at the sun. The light is also coming from the sun. So that can be there, but light is there.
In a similar way, for the mind sense, if we are means a source is basically bringing out thoughts. So then, like how this process will work, because this is very interrelated. So
Yeah, they're all interrelated.
complex
But you have to, as I said, all the teachings of Buddha are based on experience. Oh, I'm sure you must have experienced that you're walking, going for a walk, and suddenly some thought arises. Is it not within your experience?
yes, but then
How did it arise? And who is thinking? The thought is known. Thought has arisen because of certain conditions. We are not getting into that. But thought is known by the mind. So just as a form is known by the eye, a smell is known by the nose, a thought is known by what's called as mano. Mano is the right word, but in English, the nearest comes mind. So please bear with it. So better will it be to put it mano. Mano is the aspect of overall consciousness which is responsible for knowing the thoughts. And it happens in the mind itself. So therefore, there's the complexity. Because for everything else, there is a organ. There's an eye, there's a nose, there's a tongue, there's an ear, there's a distinct organ. Because what is being perceived is a material entity. Thought is not a material entity. So the organ for that is also an immaterial entity. So you have to understand it in that manner. But we all know it is within our experience. Thoughts arise and they are known. And when you practice deeply, you can see the arising of thought. Oh, thought is arising. And I'm knowing it. Oh, now it has gone out. So now that's the kind of practice which we can come up to. Really, within few years of practice, we come to that state. Oh, anger is arising. Okay. Let me see how long it will last. Gone. So there's awareness of the arising of thoughts and it are passing away. And that's how one gets free from the grips of various mental defilements like anger and aversion and lust and greed and so on. That's the practice.
also, sir, when we talk, say, experience, so experience we are referring only in the sense which is it something which is measurable, like thoughts, the intensity of thoughts is measurable to our own senses, at least, if not outside.
It is something, yeah, it's not measurable. We don't make the quantity. We don't, for example, you can't measure feeling. There's a direct experience. It is very intense. Oh, it is mild, isn't it? There's a direct experience. We don't have to ask anybody.
Not
Do you have
measurable.
to ask anybody that you are feeling pain in your toe? You don't have to ask. And you don't have to measure it. You know it's extreme pain. No, it's not as much as it was yesterday. We know it because we can do that. Experience can be calibrated by our own experience. So it is something which is directly felt, directly experienced, whether it is smell, whether it is taste, whether it is object. Oh, this is very beautiful, but not, no, that was much more beautiful. That's my memory, of course. But I can compare on the basis of memory. But there's no kind of quantitative measurement of that. Of course, the psychologists will try to put it in 3 categories or 5 categories and want to put it. That has its own value. I'm not decrying it, but it's actually putting down in quantity what is basically a qualitative term, because the quality has a spectrum. You put it down. Okay, you are having anger is very high, mild, or no anger. 3 categories or 5: rage, anger, mild anger, irritation, no anger. So you made it into 5 categories. But these are just words. They have to be, one has to tick on and one of them based on one's own personal experience. Now, what you want to call him as irritation, he may or may have different connotation of irritation. Different people have different connotation of irritation, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So this, you are translating subjective information into quantity. It is always fraught with danger, in the sense that you should not take it as a gospel truth. It is an attempt to quantify things which are fundamentally subjective and governed by the perception. For me, perception of pain, I can handle much deeper pain. Somebody else may be able to handle much more pain. And somebody else, 10 years ago, I couldn't. So what I would call as extreme pain 10 years ago, I would say, yeah, there is some pain. That's okay. So my qualification of extreme pain will be enormously high than somebody else's, or vice versa. I may be losing the ability to handle pain, and I would say, oh, this mild pain is extremely bad. So, for example, weather. The cold weather hits my body very strongly. So for me, extremely cold weather means 0 degree temperature. For my son, extremely cold weather means -20, objectively speaking. So it's all a subjective experience, basically. So you must understand that.
Yes, just a month back, I think the Dalai Lama, people were commenting that he is not well. He said, "No, I'm fine, just a little pain in my hand, nothing at all."
Yeah, that's right. So because of the subjective nature of the experience and the level of condition, that's where perception, the sanya, has played a great role. What does I perceive? What do I perceive as extreme pleasant thing? Maybe totally different from what do others perceive them as pleasant. And as we progress on the path of purification of the mind, our understanding of pleasant, unpleasant goes major change departures. So we start from where we are, therefore we value our own personal, direct, immediate personal experience. That's what the psychology is all about.
So does all the senses have a medium through which they come out? Like all the consciousness has like for the sight there is a light and then there is an object. For all this there is a medium.
Conditioning. There are conditions. You shouldn't say medium. There are conditions.
Condition.
For everything, there is a condition. You can easily see. For sound, for example, there's a condition that there should be medium. If you put a what's called a thermos flask or the double-walled structure, in the studios, they put double-walled structure with air, no air in between. Sound just can't get out. You create anechoic chambers. In our laboratories, we create experiments with anechoic chambers where the sound just cannot go out. Outside sound cannot come in because you're doing experiments on sound inside. You're doing experiments on noise. So you create a building so that the outside sound cannot get in. This is what is done in studios also. So the conditions are such that sound cannot travel. There may be a lot of noise outside, but person inside will not hear because that condition is not met. This medium has been disrupted. Similarly, for smell, you can see.
How much of this the perception, like what are the factors in the perception in the Buddhist thought are different from the cognitive processes in the Western psychology? Like in the Western, when we talk about perception, we take the senses, then we talk about the cognition part as well, the thinking, and then the memory also comes up in the cognitive school of thought, ki how the schemas work and everything. So, what are the factors that make it different?
What you call as memory is sanya, the conditioning memory. The sanya has the part of memory, and there are also other factors which play a part in memory. Cognition is primary cognition is vijnana. The affective tone of experience is vedana. The response to the experiences, that is the behavior, is the volition, sankhara. So you can see those, everything is operating there. And it goes into details, into in-depth understanding. How does this behavior arise? Apparently, you will say behavior arises because of this factor, this outside phenomena. So the fundamental teaching of the Buddha is suffering does not arise because of outside world. It arises because of me.
That means ego.
We have to understand that. Yeah, ego is there, but there are more easily accessible parameters for that. So when you'll come to the second noble truth, we'll see that. So we have to go slowly because we are first familiarizing ourselves with the categorization which the Buddha makes, the terms which he uses, so that we can really come to understand that properly.
So,
Okay.
so when we talk about like experiencing sensory consciousness through ears or through eyes or through any sense organ, and it cannot happen simultaneously. Okay, sir, am I audible now?
Yeah, you are audible, but what I was pointing out is that your sentence is wrong.
Okay, yes.
There is
sir.
no one who experiences sensory consciousness. Sensory consciousness is the subject which knows the world. Okay? So don't say I experience sensory consciousness. You're assuming there is some I experiencing sensory consciousness. Seeing is happening. That is the insight of the Buddha. Seeing is happening because of these reasons, these conditions. That's it. There's no one who is seeing. Seeing is just happening. And that may sound absolutely radical, but you reflect upon it deeply. And that's why the need for silencing the mind, calming down the mind, so that you actually begin to see, I have an illusion that I am seeing. Actually, seeing is happening because of these conditions. If these conditions are not there, I cannot do anything. Seeing will just not happen. Or if I say I don't want to see and the conditions exist, I cannot prevent it. Seeing will happen. It is autonomous. Hearing will happen. If the ears are open and sound is there, hearing will happen. Attention will be diverted there. But unless I have such a strong ability that I remove my attention and keep it somewhere else. So we realize that hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting are autonomous functions which happen when the conditions are there. There's no one who is hearing, no one who is seeing, no one who is tasting, but there is the experience of seeing, there's the experience of hearing, there's the experience of. So I'm trying to introduce you to the basic subtlety of the teaching in this very manner, in a very graduated manner, so that you can begin to reflect upon it and see whether it is true or not.
And do we regard thoughts also in the same way that arising of thoughts is happening like an autonomous?
Yeah. When you are walking on the road, going for a morning walk, I mean, maybe not these days, then thoughts arise. You're not thinking, thoughts are arising. They're forcing you to become aware of them.
Are we seeing
A
thoughts as
person who is suffering from ADHD doesn't want thoughts to arise, but they arise. If hyperactivity, if he's got hyperactivity, mind is just fluxing and it's just excreting thoughts. It's only when we have ability to control the mind, then of course the things change. You develop focus, you develop concentration, you develop calm. Then slowly and slowly we gain control over mind. There is some control over the mind. And that also is happening because of certain conditions. Okay?
Yes, and like we were talking about how we cannot, for example, though it may seem like that, but we cannot simultaneously hear, like hearing cannot happen and seeing simultaneously. So is it the same with thoughts as well? That thoughts with some other sensory,
Yeah, of course.
like it's not simultaneous. It will be one at a
Of course
time.
not.
It is one at a time. It is the typical quantum situation. One, 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 one. Arise, pass, arise, pass. If you draw a graph of waves, and if the frequency is very high, it becomes a straight line. Arising, passing, you draw the graph like that, and you reduce the time interval of rising and passing away, it'll just become a band. That's what happens. That's what we have, what deceives us in a cinema hall. There are different frames coming on the screen, but we don't see them. We see them in movement.
But so still they are consecutive. But still they are consecutive.
Overlapping, like I don't, if some,
If you
yes.
if you see the frame separately, you will be astonished.
It's one photo after another photo after another.
You sometimes try to see
But sir, still the
old film.
images at times are superimposed to basically to make
Superimposed.
No. There's no superimposition. They're just coming one after other, sequence. But the rate at which they come is more than the persistence of vision. So they persist and our eye superimposes it. Because we can't decipher them separately. On the screen, they are separate. If you ask the person who is playing the projector, he says, "Of course, my whole reel is moving here. What are you talking?" And there are separate frames in the reel. He can see them. It is our eye, because of its limitations, that it cannot see them separately, because they're going past very fast. That's the reason.
But aren't we putting the arising of thoughts in an analogy of the passing of the cinema, which is a linear process? It doesn't necessarily have to be a linear process. If it is not a linear process, then how it can form a straight line?
What do you mean by linear process?
Linear.
They arise and pass away. Arise and pass away. There's no concept of linearity in them. An impression is arising and going away. Another impression arises, going away. Another impression arises, goes away. And those impressions, because of our limitations of senses, they seem continuous to us. I was just giving an analogy of like that graph and all that, because of my own conditioning of being a science student.
5 thoughts at one time, one after another, after another.
Right.
Always one. You can just, if you are careful, you will notice it. It's not about thoughts, it's not difficult. You can easily, but you have to be mindful of that and not get lost. We get lost in the thoughts. So then there's no way of knowing what is happening. Then we are clinging to the thought and we are wrestling with them or enjoying them or whatever. But if you're observing them, thoughts arising, staying, passing away, that's arising. And there is some correlation between them. But sometimes if the person, what do you mean by a deranged person? Whose thoughts don't have a correlation. There's no coherence. That's the only difference. Our thoughts, fortunately, are coherent. One thought leads to another associative memory, then another thought, then there is a coherence in them. When we say a person is mentally deranged, there's no coherence. Person is looking at the soap case and he sees soap and then he says, "Oh, it is actually biscuit, so let me eat it." The thoughts are not at all coherent. It imagines things out of the blue. and we say is mentally ill. Okay,
Yes, sir.
good. Thank you. So,
Thank you, sir. Namaste.
Thank you,
Namaste.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
I'm putting these PowerPoint presentations on my website. For example, for the first 2 lectures, I already put. You can refer to the website and you can see those presentations. If you want to make notes, they are there. And these recordings are also being now done, and they will be available in our website of the trust. If you go to YouTube and type Dhammarama, Dhammarama, under that there's large number of videos, but you will also find Buddhist psychology videos one by one as they are being posted there. Okay, so you can don't worry if you have not noted down things properly. You can always do that again.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so namaste.
Namaste, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.